To another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm one of your hosts. Glad to be with you. And I'm here with my friend and colleague, Patsy Feeman. Patsy, how are you today?
I'm fabulous. Thanks.
Good. Glad to see you again. And with our other partner in crime, Leb Tannenbaum. Leb, welcome. And I'll turn it over to you and allow you to introduce our guest for today's episode.
Thank you, Patrick. So I am very excited to have Karen Matthews here with us today. And she's been generous enough to give me a little bit of bio information. So I'm literally going to read some of that off so you can get a sense of who Karen is. So after 25 years in high tech in the electronics industry, Karen retired to the good life on the Oregon coast in 2004. She's being a young, energetic person under 50 years old, and I won't comment any more about age. She immediately volunteered for a variety of community activities, one of which was the Master Gardeners Program through Oregon State University. And this program led her to her next kind of career, creating and growing an education program at a newly formed land trust in the Halem North Coast area. Over a 16-year period, Karen established a community outreach program to promote food security in our region, and the program has grown and grown and grown to 50 volunteers and fed countless people over the years, and not just fed yummy, healthy, organic food that they would not normally get. It's really awesome. And more importantly, it's a foundation for meeting new people and supporting community needs. I can say for myself, I met a lot of great people because I volunteered to be a part of this program, specifically the Alder Creek Farm. And Karen has brought many leadership skills from her various roles in high tech, but she's also recognized and described that leading and motivating volunteers gave her a whole new perspective. So really excited for you listeners out there, you CEOs out there. Part of what we're excited about is Karen has this dual perspective, deep in both. And, you might want to consider thinking about your employees as volunteers, because it seems like that's kind of the trend right now. People are coming and going, and if they're not excited, if they're not inspired by something, if they're not feeling a part of something, they're going to go find a place to go elsewhere. So volunteers. So really just to kick it off, I'm really fascinated. I never talked to you about this before, Karen. And just to clarify, I worked in the garden under Karen's leadership, and I noticed right away something special was going on, and I'm still getting to learn more. And one of them is you took the Master Gardeners Program through Oregon State University, and it seemed to have triggered like this incredible journey after, a really amazing, successful career in high tech. Can you tell us about the program and how it inspired you?
Yeah, thanks, Leb, for the great introduction. I feel really fortunate when I retired at the coast. I wanted to try a lot of different things, and I moved just 70 miles from the west side of the Portland metro area over to the Oregon coast. And I had been a lifelong gardener. I had a gentleman's farm, if you will, small acreage. And I moved to what had been my vacation house, and I realized that gardening was really, really different. So I was doing this for me. It wasn't with any anticipation of getting involved in strategic program or growing this, really what has turned out to be a community resource. So I went and took the classes, and Oregon State University subsidizes your education. It's a full college course program for a term, and you in return do payback hours, and you do support in the office at the Master Gardener office, answering public's questions on problems they're having or what kinds of varieties of plants to grow, that sort of thing. And then your first year, they also want you to do outreach and community service at least 30 hours. Well, I'm a little bit of a, I guess, type A. So I got drafted to start up this community garden, and it had just been newly fenced. It's a 54-acre property. We wanted to make it a learning opportunity for people who had food insecurity, and went out and recruited some folks that were lower income, as well as some other people. We had 8 people to start with the first year, and only 3 of them finished. It was a little disappointing, but it was a start, and it was an opportunity to think about what was it that we were really trying to do here. And so through a series of conversations and talking to people about the overall mission of the trust and how that would morph into the community garden, really started focusing on the earth sciences and the education. A lot of people think soil is dirt. And what do I call it? Soil. I always repeat, they don't dig in the dirt, you dig in the soil. And how to feed your soil and what that life is in. I mean, it's a whole living, breathing organism that is there. And teaching that element, because the land trust's mission is to conserve land in perpetuity for all species. So we look at the flora and the fauna and water and air, and how do all of those elements come together, and how we, as just one little human animal link, impact that. And then how we take those learnings, apply those to our own yards, our teaching our kids, our grandkids, whatever. And the second year, we had more people that came. We had 12 people. 3 of them were school teachers, which was fabulous because there's the educational part. And we did have some kids, school kid programs at the farm. And it really became one of tying those elements together. We had the physical resources, and then we needed to have that strategy that really implemented and supported the land trust's mission, as well as pull people together. Leb mentioned that we now have 50 people after 16 years. And this is our second year of having 50. I think we were 40 some the year before. But it's gotten to a point now where people sign up right away because it fills up and we're done. So that feels really good. It became a way for people really to learn what's available in the community. There's a lot of new retirees that came in. In fact, those 3 teachers that I mentioned, that was in 2005, I believe. Yeah, 2005, 2006 timeframe. Well, Oregon had a PERS program, the Public Employee Retirement System, and there was an opportunity for an early out, and they were going to change their retirement program. So we had a pretty big turnover of teachers saying, I'm taking it, I'm going for it. So it was really fortunate for me because you've got some like-minded people who have some earth sciences background, or at least educational and very patient type of people that will explain to multiple different backgrounds, what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it, and try to pull them into developing a love of place and systems. So we started growing food. We grew twice as much as what we needed because one of our missions was that food security element. And we eventually took, I think our record was 2,600 pounds of fresh, organically grown food. That's a lot of lettuce. To be fair, of course, there were squash and pumpkins and beans and, you name it. We grew it, and lots of berries and, fruits and just about everything. But it's the sharing and the element of people who come, a lot of people that come and join the program are newly retired or new to the community, and they want to get integrated into other programs. So it's a perfect opportunity for people to meet others. I think, Leb, you came in that. I don't know how long you had been in the community at the time.
I had been back and forth from Portland to the coast, and then moved to the coast in March of 2020 when the pandemic opened.
Oh, okay, great. So yeah, so it does kind of fall in line with that.
It totally did.
Yeah, getting to know a variety of different people, and the variety. It's really funny because I talk about how diverse it is. Well, we're mostly retired people. I'd say 80%, but the diversity comes in what your background was. So we've got people who are artists. We have people who are engineers. We have had people who were CEOs. We have people, we've had a lawyer. We've had all walks of life of different business experience. We have some that were what do they call them? Domestic engineers, homemakers. We've had families with children. I don't like to say I have favorites, but I really enjoy the kids that are upper grade school to early middle school age, very impressionable, very eager to learn, and just to watch their wheels turn is very interesting. And I did that with some of my employees back at the electronics factory in terms of giving them things to work on or projects that gives them a sense of a little bit of autonomy, but a sense of accomplishment that when they complete something, it gives them self-worth and helps with their job satisfaction. So
sure. Karen, if we go back to the word soil, and I'm hearing a couple of things. One is, the land trust has a mission, right? So that's a part of this. But then, again, you have way more understanding than I do, but this was a former dairy farm, right?
It was, yeah, 54-acre dairy.
So in a way, it's like, it's reminding me of this is a startup, right?
Yeah, it was a startup. The dairy industry, you think, farming can't be too hard on the earth, but it really is. First off, the land is adjacent to the Nehalem Bay estuary. And so the ebb and flow of the waters had to be diked so that and then the ground, first off, it was all the vegetation or the trees and shrubs were removed. And, the land was leveled so the cows don't break their legs and so on and so forth. And of course, they create a lot of methane. So it's really not a very earth-friendly process when it comes to the output for the impact. So when the trust acquired the land, they set forth getting conservation easement grants, and I talked about fencing the garden area. We did that because we have a resident herd of about 50 elk, and they are there on a regular basis. They're wonderful to watch. They're part of that ecosystem and, all that balance. When we first started gardening, the soil is so sandy there. We've built it up with organic amendments over time, and really repaired a lot of the damage that was done through the farming element. We've breached the dike. That took lots of permits and all that, but breached the dike so that the natural floodwaters come in and come out. Well, water comes in and comes out. Water flows where water flows. And if you happen to put some nasty chemicals on your garden at home or on your driveway to get rid of the weeds, or they spray all along the highways, all that goes somewhere and it gets washed off.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes into the waterways. So teaching people about those concepts, what they can do differently so that they can still manage their gardens and yards and hardscapes, and be a little bit more gentle to the earth is kind of what we're about. That's our element that goes into that overall sustainability of the natural environment.
Right, right.
So the garden just becomes the kind of living evidence or proof of what you're talking about, that it's.
Yeah, it does. It has, over the years, as I mentioned, we went from a sand pit to a very fertile growing area, and we make our own compost. We do bring in some materials, but we do try to turn all of the elements that we cut and grow there into organic amendments for our soil. We do have some ducks that help us manage beneficial insects. There's an orchard. There's some ancient, when I say ancient for us, the European settlers, the early settlers planted apple trees and pear trees. And so we are the recipient of those. And when we first started the garden, we planted a bunch of baby trees, and now and we have over the years planted a few more here and there. But now some of those early trees have grown up, and it's a little harder to see which ones were the heritage trees. You can taste it in the apples, but yeah, so it has become really a lovely spot that welcomes people, not only the gardeners that commit, the 50 gardeners that commit to doing, participating in the program. They work 3 hours a week for 9 months out of the year in exchange for their produce. They also get the satisfaction, and this is, year after year I do surveys, and the satisfaction that they talk about is being able to help their community. People in food bank situations get a lot of dried food. Lower income folks many times have very high carb loaded diets, end up with other health issues like diabetes, obesity, things that are kind of I guess I would say it's a result of not being able to afford to make the right decisions. It's not that they don't know, but they really can't afford, a whole lot of fresh vegetables, and certainly not organic vegetables. So we harvest every Tuesday morning. We package it up. We take it to the food bank, and at 1 o'clock they start distributing there.
Cool.
So highly nutritious, just picked, probably more nutritious than the organic vegetables that you get at the grocery
Okay.
store because, as you know, when you have a living organism, as soon as you cut it or kill it, it starts deteriorating. So,
Mm.
yeah, these are super high nutrient.
That's
And
great.
then we also, yeah, so it's really been a very rewarding aspect. And people say that is one of the number one things, that and the camaraderie that they feel,
Mm.
um, are key elements. And so I've really tried to play on that when we talk about why we do what we do, how they have personally contributed to that, because it's a feel good story.
Mhm.
It's, you can take that in any kind of a job. And if a person feels pride and um, a sense of accomplishment and connection, we're all animals. We want to do it again because it feels good, right?
Yes. So to
Karen,
pick,
I have a
yeah.
question.
Okay.
Karen, you said that you have you survey your people every year.
Mhm.
Um, in addition to hearing how rewarding it is for them, have you heard? Do you get ideas and feedback for how to change things up? Is that,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was in my high tech role. I worked for Tektronix, which is a large electronics company that was great in allowing employees, if you're motivated, to go and take lots of different kinds of classes and technical, but I had jobs in research and development. I was a sales engineer for 5 years. I was in marketing. I was in purchasing, logistics. So I jumped around a lot, and it gave me the opportunity to find elements that had a common thread, but also expose me so that I could really kind of drill down to what floats their boat for my employees. I have a line worker, somebody who's in the warehouse, who is just as important as one of my engineers doing design for manufacturability. Just they look at things a little bit differently, but they have their own set of needs. So what I've done with the gardeners and kind of learned this from, I guess, the high tech experience, is you really kind of have to know your audience. What
Mhm.
is it that they value? Sure. Think back your first job out of college. What you value is a paycheck to pay off the student loans and not eat mac and cheese and top ramen all the time. But and that's important. I mean, money.
Mhm.
You got to have some money, but um, you also want some level of job satisfaction so that you don't feel you're an indentured servant that has
Yes.
to like do the same thing over and over and over. And some of those jobs are that way. They're repetitive. So by giving them an opportunity to learn new things, take some formal education, and then roll some of those, or actually really demonstrate to their coworkers the value of that, and that kind of perpetuates that desire and push to have other people learn also.
Yeah. So I have experience because I worked under your leadership, and I'm thinking about this quote. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Hmm.
And the minute I walked onto the farm the first time, I knew that there was an intense kind of passionate caring of something. I mean, I was, and you were the leader, and we would, if you can imagine, there'd be 40 or so people in a circle, and Karen would step up and lead us through something. Oftentimes it was a lesson. Um,
Well, that's
So-
good. I'm really glad that you felt that right away.
I did. It was a little scary, actually.
Kumbaya, right?
What did I walk into? Um, but if we're cross-referencing to your high-tech career, and then we're talking about the farm and the land trust, and you're the leader. One thing that I noticed in terms of caring was that you're a really passionate leader, and so for our listeners, it's like, okay, well, if I'm starting to think about my employees as volunteers, what can you say about being a passionate leader, expressing that passion, and what happens in the absence of that?
Yeah.
Right? Because there were times when you weren't there, but what I noticed is somebody else picked up the torch.
Yeah. Well, that came after several years of, dialing the program in, if you will. It's hard to lead 50 people hands-on when you've got so many different cogs. We have a large greenhouse, as you know, so that was kind of in an isolated area. And we have different teams and different elements in the orchard and permaculture and then the row garden. And so, it's a little cliche, but the leading by example really, it's true. I mean, I am passionate about feeding people who are underprivileged good food. The reason I'm a gardener is because I love to eat. And I like really high quality food. I love to cook. And in fact, that's one of the things that we did do is and not so much since you came, Leb, but we used to have potlucks 4 or 5 times a year. And people would show off. I would challenge them. Okay, this is what's ripe now and harvest.
That's good.
Let's make something with only ingredients from the garden. Okay, you can use salt, pepper too, but but tying it back to just how good that is, and breaking bread with people has been a long known tradition of getting people to loosen up a bit, getting to know them. I tried in each season, and we have, let me back up. We have 50 gardeners, but maybe 40 will come back. So we'll have, an influx of 20% a year. So trying to get to know the new people, buddy them up with somebody, try to understand what their background is, what their skill sets are, what their desires are. I mean, I had a person who was very, very adept. In fact, had been a water master at a municipality of a city about 150,000 people. So, small city. And we had a need for irrigation experts. Water's the lifeblood, right? Well, he really didn't want to do that anymore. So he helped train, and he was happy to do that. But we then redirected him to some other things that he wanted to do, which some of it included some special project construction. So that's not just gardening, but all sorts of elements. And so what are people interested in? How much confidence do they have? And how can you build that if they don't exhibit a lot, but by giving them small wins to begin with, and then, building that up and giving them a team of people to work with so that, people go, oh, what if I ruin this crop? And what's my line, Leb? If we don't have any, or we ruin that crop, we have grocery stores. Don't worry about it. We're not going to starve. So really getting to know people, understanding, a little bit of their background. So for instance, an artistic person, I may have them see if they're interested in making some directional signs or creating an area in a garden that looks at herbs that would be a tasting garden, kind of combine those skills, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Karen, you mentioned at some point that you also relied on data to be successful with this project. And, as you know, we recently had, a data person on, Deshers from iBridge. And, one of the things that I think we're all facing is kind of potentially being overwhelmed by data. Can you talk a little bit about using data, in this case, developing something that didn't even exist before, passionate about, feeding the underserved and healthy food. So that's there. But then how do there's the science that I noticed going on to being successful.
Yeah.
I certainly have that data, and you seem to walk around with a lot of it. How do people accumulate the right data?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that I came from my high-tech job 70 miles east of here, and it's amazing how much different it is, this growing climate at the coast. It's wet. It's not too terribly warm, but then you get a drought for 6 weeks of the year. So the varieties of things that you grow is, a lot of people feel like they're failures because they can't, well, I did everything on the seed packet. Well, it wasn't the right variety. Or there are some tricks of the trade to create heat units. So recording what you're planting, doing a little bit of research also, but recording what does well, what doesn't do well. We do taste tests. We've had tomato taste offs, which is really fun. Who likes this type of tomato versus that type of tomato? And then what was your yield? If you grow, 100 pounds of a tomato that you don't like, what's the good? Well, it's red, I guess. It's or yellow or orange. It's in your salad and creates color, but we really want to have good, nutritious, and tasty food. So, gathering crop data is important. I've also used data on water use. We have creek rights, so we pump water. We have 100,000 gallon catchment tank, so we gather water from rain each year. And believe me, it fills up every single year. Then we also augment with some city water when we're doing clean outs and pumping replenishments. So, we got to keep track of our water use. Then what produce are we sending to the food bank? We also, so this was a really feel-good part of about 10 years in. Well, 2008, of course, we had, the market challenges and a lot of people, more food insecurity. So we had a lot of demand. And then by 11, 12, and the economy had rebounded, we were oversupplying. We gave them more food than what they could use, which that feels good, but we also don't want to waste food. Yep. So we did some outreach and went to the local senior meals program at one of the churches. And they've also set up a food pantry that is different than the food bank, that has a little different clientele. So, we were able to determine what was used, what they liked, what they didn't like. And then if they were not utilizing all of a certain vegetable, like kale. Some people just say, "Oh, I don't like kale." Well, you don't like kale. Maybe you just don't like kale. That's true. That is a thing. But maybe you'd like it if you had it prepared this way. So we would send recipes. And at one point we had some of the Master Gardener outreach people preparing once a month. They would prepare something out of, I would tell them what I'm going to have in the garden. They would prepare it and serve it in little containers at the food bank. And that would encourage people to take it and try it. And we tried to do a little meal kit, but that was problematic. That was a little hard. But, just training, educating, sharing, encouraging people to try new things, our gardeners as well as our clients. But in fact, I have a funny story. One of our long-term gardeners who's been with the program many years used to still work in Portland. And so she came to the coast and every week and worked in the garden. And she is a New Yorker who really likes to be out there. She's one of those people that is just verbose, fun, likes to be recognized. So I started creating names for her. She was the compost queen. And boy, she turned more compost. I mean, so what floats their boat? What is it that they resonates with them in their personality, in their interests? She unfortunately blew a knee out, so then she had to become the berry queen. But hey, she still had the hat on, so it doesn't matter. But it's those kinds of things of getting to know. And then there's some people that are so shy, they really don't want to have anything, they don't want to be noticed. But there's things they can do too. Maybe they collect some data. Maybe they record how much food we send. In fact, we have one gal who's very, very quiet and also has some physical limitations. So she does mostly inside work, measuring, recording, packaging, that kind of stuff. So,
So I'd love to hear more. It's been really inspiring about how everybody's clear about the why, the alignment with the mission and why am I showing up. You mentioned a greenhouse, you mentioned berries, you mentioned compost, you mentioned 50 volunteers. To get really practical, how do you manage and align and make sure that people show up and do what you're asking to do, which is important for volunteers. It's important for anybody running a business.
It is. And because this is hands-on, the work from home model doesn't quite work here, but we do have an equivalent, if you will. When the pandemic hit, my gardeners were devastated. I mean, we all were, just from the health risks and the unknown. But there was talk of just not having a garden that year. And by this point in time, I had created a leadership team. So I had, I think, 4 leaders plus myself. And they would help run the operation if I wasn't there. We have 2 days a week, and so I might be there on a Tuesday, and they would be there on a Saturday. They would help me make decisions on budget items. We had projects, and we had shortfalls. Do we have anybody that can write grants, that kind of thing? Well, when the pandemic hit, the first thing, of course, is safety. And we had to make sure that, everybody felt that we were taking the right precautions. I didn't want to be a super spreader. I didn't want to get it either. And though we are mostly outside, we do have a barn and greenhouse. So we had inside tasks. And we also had 4 members with active cancer. I think 3 that were in remission. And then we had spouses, who partners who, their partner who wasn't at the garden had compromised health. So we quickly did what I call COVID spread. And that was to somewhat discreetly, well, I sent out surveys and asking people, what their interest was, what their concerns were, how we could model and restructure so that they could continue if they wanted to. And we ended up with those people that were in compromised health scenarios. I gave them their own time throughout the week. They had their 3-hour time and they were the only one there. Or a couple of them said, I'm fine if I'm here and the other person's over in the orchard, or, they were far enough away and they're outside. We also had a cleaning protocol that was, of course, originally it was like, oh, it stays on a surface, for 72 hours. And so we scrubbed everything down with bleach water and sterilized it and used, all sorts of antibacterials and antiviral sprays and so on and so forth, which turned out it was more respiratory systems than anything. But the point being, how do you cater to people's needs? Whether it's pandemic or whether it's they don't want to work in the office, whether they, I have kids who are in the working fields and they work from home. Some have children, some don't. But, to try to carry on a professional meeting with kids and dogs and, all the turmoil and, do they have a quiet place? Do they have the right chair? Do they have, the right electronics? Have we set them up for success?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just all of those elements that thinking through, if you want results, you need to make it as easy as possible for people. And there isn't just, it's just not, there's all shades of gray. There's just not black and white.
Right.
Being a baby boomer, you're there. I was going to say 9 to 5, but that never happened. It was 7 to 7, many times. But you did get to know your coworkers. It's a different world. It's a different expectation for this generational shift. And I have grandchildren I have a blended family. And so I've got older grandchildren who, some of the things that they've said to me, and I'm thinking, wow, really? I mean, you want to enjoy your work life? I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard.
Part of what you just said, Karen, is, it was intentional to develop some leaders around you.
Uh-huh.
And, I think that crosses over to whether, I can already see the similarities between running a farm, so to speak, and a business. But do you have any guidance for leaders, CEOs who are trying to develop leaders around them? How did you pick and choose, right? You had this wide variety of people with some common interest, but how did you pick and choose? Because, I had actually entered in the pandemic, and it was clear that there were 4 or 5 people who had leadership roles. And, but, you had over the years, all these people who came and some who left. How did you develop that leadership team? How did you make those choices?
Yeah, people rise to an occasion if they are passionate about something.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that have gravitated towards that leadership role were leaders in their careers. I've got people from Nike and Intel, and they were middle to upper management, and so it's part of their nature, I guess. and taking the extra time when I recognize the skill set of a person who they tend to ask more questions. They tend to, even if they think they know the answer, they're naturally curious and they want to learn. And you know when you can throw out more technical terms with people like that, because they're not going to just let it go, over their head. They're going to want to know, well, how does that connect? And, what makes that tick? And they are also more risk takers. I have found they, are not afraid. And this is something though that I did really, hopefully, advocate a lot for, is don't be afraid to fail, because we all learn from it. And there's grocery stores.
Oh, and by the way, yes.
So I think that element though of the fear of failure, first off, very rare do you have a complete and utter failure. I mean, there's different levels of wins, and sometimes it can be kind of mediocre, but you learn from it. So if you learn from it, then it's a win. You can put that in the W column, and not chastising people, but being there also for them if they've got questions, and recognizing if they're struggling a little bit. Not overstep by stepping in, but inquiring and making sure they know that you're there for support.
So there were certain characteristics. Some of them were background, some of them were curiosity, some of them were boldness, or some of it sounds like was passion, shared passion, maybe a natural desire.
Right. Then we have a couple though, Leb, that didn't come from those professional career areas. That one is a professional writer. So different skill sets. And the other has been just kind of a workaday person, and very interested in mechanical systems, got into our irrigation and watering, which is lifeblood, as I mentioned. So it's a very important element, and that made them feel really good and have the confidence to branch out even more.
So volunteers, you're not paying me to show up, right?
Only in food and love.
Right. So that's the currency, right? But I just want to talk a little bit. We talked about a lot of the positives. Did you ever have to reprimand people, or?
Yeah, I had a few problem children through the years. Actually, they reprimanded me, and they exited the program kind of by peer pressure, because I like to think I'm a pretty warm, accepting person, but I also only take so much. And groups self-select over time. If you have someone who is just not fitting in for whatever reason, there are other options for them. Speaking of fitting in, this has been a really interesting social experiment in terms of integrating people into our community. Somebody's new to the community, they don't really know very many people. They may have dabbled in some gardening, or they may be excellent gardeners. But we have had spin-offs, if you will, with fabric arts, so knitting, crocheting, quilting. We've had a hiking group. We've had, there's several of us that belong to the local dragon boat team. What else? Anyway, we talk about fishing and crabbing and mushroom hunting, and just stuff that people on the on the coast like to do, common interests and, when's the next good tide and those kinds of things. They love my crab cakes. You didn't get to have any of those yet, Leb, but we have another potluck, food and, a lot. Okay. So when I was in high tech, particularly when I was in my purchasing, I was global logistics and purchasing hat, and my suppliers, that's one of the key things that you do in business is you go out to dinner, you talk a lot about, strategies and programs and it's over food.
Yeah.
Get a little bit of wine, but yeah. It's kind of it's one of those three elements that we all need. So it pulls people together. And now that people don't come to the office, there's opportunity maybe for CEOs to make sure that their management groups still pull people together in more of and I don't want to call it just strictly social, but in a social aspect of business elements. Granted, large banquet dinners are not my thing, but if you can get work groups together in an environment where they're doing a little bit of both, I think we'll cement some working relationships.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. So let's talk a little bit about play, because I found at times it was very playful to be a member of the community garden, and that literally some of the play was, if you can guess what's on Karen's mind, you win an artichoke.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're all in a circle and we're playing these games, and it was fun. So is it okay to have fun in business? Is it okay to
you
play
have to.
games? Is it essential?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, we all get stressed in our day-to-day lives, and we feel harried and hurried to get things done. And there needs to be some time to just let some of that go. And Leb's mentioning artichokes, but we do it with asparagus. We do it with anything that doesn't grow a lot of. Actually, the artichokes, we grow a lot of those. It's just at the first of the season. But the prized things, the things that, okay, this is a prized piece of produce that I am thinking of a color, or I'm thinking of a plant or an animal or whatever. And it's just kind of playful for people to start calling out these things. And then I award it. And we've had people come back with recipes and say, oh my gosh, I got that last week. Do you know what I did with it? I mean, it's just that bonding.
Right.
So, yeah. We've done some other play in terms of our bonfire, and I don't know if you guys had food around the bonfire this year or not, but in past years, so we do generate a lot of refuge from the orchard. We grind up or try to compost as much as we can, but there are times where we have to burn some limbs, and we have to burn invasive species like Himalayan blackberry and that sort of thing, ivy, that gets cleared from some of our conservation areas. So fire, there's another human element, right? That draws people together. And so I would have potluck rolled around that. And we've had one time we had people bring instruments and they sang around the fire. We've had s'mores. The little kids think it's great fun. So it's those bonding things that are outside of your 3-hour work time that are, kind of extracurricular. You get to bring your spouse or your family at that point. And, people have heard you talk about Joey or, Eleanor or whomever. And you get to put a name and a face, and, that just humanizes things a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Karen, there are, my understanding, there are other gardens out there, right? You are one of them. There are other models like this out there. Do you get folks that come to you who have been at other places? I'm kind of coming back to the employees as volunteers analogy that we're talking about today. Do you get folks that come to you who say, yeah, I don't want to work there. I was there, and not to disparage anybody else necessarily, but what draws them to you? And it's probably a lot of what we're just talking about, the fun and the fact that you're tapping into what lights them up and what matters to them. But yeah, I mean, do you get that? Do you get folks who have had maybe a negative experience someplace else who then show up to you and
Yeah. And when you say negative, it could be from a couple of different facets of maybe they, most community gardens are community gardens. Mine, the one we have here is a communal garden, because community gardens, typically you get your 10-foot by 10-foot plot. You pick what you're going to grow. You're responsible for getting your seeds. They usually provide water. They might do some tilling. But everything that goes in comes out, and that's for you. You might talk to the guy, in the plot next to you, or the family down the way that seems to come the same time that you do every week. But with this, we're all there together. We're all gardening together, and we all learn together. And I have learned so much from the volunteers. Not just about gardening or crops, but about life in general. I was much more regimented when I started. Just came out of corporate America and needed to loosen up and lighten up a little bit. It's first off, it's a garden, but it's really more one of sharing and developing a community outlet. So you can do some of this in industry or, in a business and take some of those elements. You can't really have a water fight and a bonfire every week, but, it's the concepts. So, yeah, there's been people who have come and studied us, actually, from other land trusts and from other gardens that say, how did you structure this? How do you get these people to all do this? Just I guess talking about, the education element is really one of the keys. Talking about the values that they add and trying to be warm and welcoming. Not me necessarily to all the people, although I do try, but encourage other people to also welcome in people and make them feel like they're part of a team.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you're a volunteer or if you're an employee. You want those things. I mean, that's people want. They want to be part of a team. They want to feel welcomed. They want to learn. I just think that's great.
Yeah, it's been very rewarding. I certainly didn't plan it. I was a volunteer for 8 years myself when I started it up, 8.5 years. And my husband got a little tired of me spending a lot of our money for supplies, and it's like I could make it better. So we got funding. The trust got funding for a stipend. It wasn't much, but it's it's enough. It was enough. So and I was going to do that for 3 years as an employee, and 8 years later, I finally retired. I wanted to make sure that the program was sustainable. I wanted to assure that we had enough structure could show enough value to the board of directors that they would continue to fund my position. And knowing all along that my replacement would not have the same skill sets that I did, because they're paying them, $20 an hour. Actually, it's a little less that to start, but whatever, it's that element.
Mhm.
But I did it out of a labor of love, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of learning, and I met a lot of people. So by setting it up so that things were documented, they were shown a value that we could be consistent in creating that food security element, and then allowing me to exit. Unfortunately, it was a little slower than what I had planned because pandemic, oh yeah, that little thing that got in our way. But having the leadership group there, we added a couple people, so we had 6 leaders, and it ended up going really fairly. It went smoothly. I'm going to put it that way. There's
Yeah.
always going to be some hiccup when you, take your foot out of the water. The ripples just kind of, everybody's replaceable, and I knew that. But I also didn't want it to be a big challenge for the next person. I wanted them to feel confident.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep. Well, I'm still working there, and
Good.
you've retired, and they have finally found someone to take that paid role.
They
And
did. Yeah.
when you talk about building for kind of a sustainable future, I have to acknowledge you did that, because I'm there and things are really good there.
Good.
It has continued. It's the leadership spread out approach is really useful. Getting Janice, her name is, in that position, watching the other leaders mentor and support the new quote unquote paid leader has been just beautiful. So I just want to say that and applaud that. The last thing I wanted to explore is I think I don't know how intentional it was, but everything you're describing, the culture there has continued, right? And we do a lot of culture work in business organizations where the culture actually fades or changes when leadership changes. So just wanted to kind of touch base for a moment on maybe it's already been talked about in some way, but just ask you, because you are the leader who passed this along, even with a slightly different leadership model. But that positive, caring community culture is alive and well.
Wow, that's great. It is, I think, a tribute to the people at the coast. We're a small community.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got, like anywhere else in our country, people who see things, one way or another. But because we're a small community, you run into people over and over again in a different experience. Your postmaster might also be a volunteer fire department person. Your teacher might be swim coach. The yoga teacher works at the health food store. So you run into these people with different hats on, and you want to be kind anyway. I mean, that's the way we should all live our lives. But, instead of this outward anger that you see in big cities. It's different here. It really is. And I think, you know, maybe I'm blessed because my kids have really adopted a very kind, caring, you know, they're into meditation and yoga and, you know, healthy foods and healthy living. And so I'm very fortunate that way. But it seems to me like the millennials and younger are more so that way than what our boomers were. Maybe I don't know if that's just my perspective, because I don't know, but it seems like a little kinder, gentler, more aware, I guess. What's the word I'm searching for? A word that's in the realm of awareness, just self-aware.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mindful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm just feeling that because I got lucky and my kids have kind of gone that way. But they're more so than what I was. I mean, you know, I've been a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent. So there you go. Uh,
Did we miss anything, Karen, that you wanted to touch
you
on?
know, I just think that in the jobs that I've had, or I've listened to other people have, where they are not as happy, as they are treated more like one of the cogs rather than an individual.
Mhm.
And I think the more we can recognize people for the unique creatures that they are, the better, because then we can, as managers, also be more understanding when things go a certain way, or somebody handles a situation in a manner that may not be wrong, and it may even be better. You never
Yeah.
know. But you know, just really not as a widget or a machine, but you know, you are a complex person that,
Yeah.
you know, you need to be honored for that.
Yeah. Thank
You
you.
know, you can cajole people, you can bribe them, you can force them, you can do the carrot. You know, when you are working just for money, it has a different feel, but you'll get a whole lot more out of them, and they'll get a lot more out of their job if it's a collaborative, iterative process that they feel they've got some control, or some, not so much control, but contribution, you know, a meaningful contribution.
Yes.
Excellent.
That's great.
I agree.
All right.
Is it time to get practical?
I
Okay,
think let's get practicals.
Okay. So for our, if this is your first episode, then where have you been for the other 29 episodes?
Good comment, Patrick.
But the folks who have been with us before know this is the time in every episode where we get practical, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. So based on our conversation today, what are some of the key takeaways from what we talked about today, or the key things that a listener can implement tomorrow to begin making inroads, make progress in his or her business? So, Karen, I'll kick it to you, and then we'll follow up behind and see what kind of
Sure.
notes each of us took.
Yeah, I was reading. I read a lot of news, more than I need to sometimes. I think, wow. But I do try to keep up with current events. And one of the employment news items that kind of jolted me I can't remember if it was this morning or yesterday. Elon Musk talked about you will come to work or you will not have a
Yes.
job. And I just went,
Mm.
whoa. Okay, well, we're certainly not recognizing people as individuals, are we? I guess that's your prerogative, but there will be a mass exodus. You cannot operate a business that way anymore. It's just, it's disrespectful, first off. But, if you recognize people as individuals, you can't meet all of their needs. But if they feel that you at least have compassion and empathy for their needs, and you're trying to meet some of them, they're just going to do more for you. There's that carrot and cajoling, but it's done from a different perspective, a different angle, and one of willingness rather than force. So that is the biggest takeaway, I think, is recognize the individual, what makes them tick. How can you meet some of their needs at least?
Yep.
That's great.
I had that same kind of jolting reaction when I read that. Physically, it was like somebody punched me. So yes.
Yeah, I just thought it was, at first I thought it was a joke, Saturday Night Live.
Karen, any more you want to add?
Nope, I think that's the
Okay.
key takeaway.
That's great.
Mhm.
Lab or Patsy?
You want to go first, Patsy, or?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have a lot. I have 2 pages worth. But, I'll start with the classic. It's lead by example. Because no one worked any harder than you. No one played, any more than you. And no one cared any more than you. And kind of carried the torch of the purpose and the mission in such a way that, you didn't at times even need to say a word. It was leading by example. So for the people who are listening, lead by example. Know that you are being perceived, you are being watched and observed, and that's part of the deal when you're a leader. You're in that role. I like the whole notion of setting people up for success, which means you have to understand their motivations. You have to understand the circumstances that they live in, what they're passionate about, what they value, all of those kinds of things. But set your people up for success. One of them was, I wrote down, food, love, and fire are currency for bringing people together.
I like that saying. Can I coin that?
You got it.
Food, love, and fire. All right.
Yeah, and it's important to bring people together and recognize that those are some of the currency. And I'll go with one more that probably at first when I hear it, I'm like, ooh, but we're all replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
Don't set up leadership such that everything's going to fall apart when you're not there. And especially, what we've learned through COVID is someone might not be there for 3 months.
Yeah.
Right. Someone might not be there at a critical moment. And if it's all on you as opposed to distributed, which you did intentionally, I saw this development of these other leaders around you, and you're replaceable. Even if initially the ego says no, that's not true. But that's a good tip. That's a good get practical. So I'll stop there and I'll hand it off.
Good. You can surf those waves when the ripples.
Coastal stuff.
Yeah, it is coastal stuff. One that you said early on that I thought was really important was teach, educate, and apply learning consistently in alignment with the organization's mission. And you didn't say this, but you've said it over and over and over again. So consistently teach, educate, and apply. So I thought I was really struck by be proactive when there's a disruption. we're talking about a major disruption such as COVID, but be proactive and inform yourself of what people need to change. You know, what needs to be changed with your people. So I thought that was really, and then I loved breaking bread together. You know, and it's important to pull your team together and get to know each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I had a few, and then we'll circle back, give you guys a chance to add anything that we may have missed. Karen, you were talking about as you said you go from 50 people down to 40 people because you bring on some new folks, and then you go back up to 50. And so you kind of talked about the model of like buddying up your new people with your experienced people to integrate them into what you're doing so that they can learn the culture and learn why we do things and how we do them. And I think that gets missed in a lot of organizations still today. We just kind of throw people there and think they'll figure it out, but the integration is an important piece. You had 3 like quick hitters all in a row, and I wrote as fast as I could, but I thought they were all really cool. One was, if you want results, you have to make it as easy as possible for your people. And I just think about sometimes how complicated we either make it complicated for our people, or we know it's complicated for them, and we're not actively trying to alleviate those frustrations. So if you want results, you got to make it as easy as possible. That was one. The second one, you said people will rise to the occasion if they're passionate about something. So find out what they're passionate about. Like how do you focus them? But if they'll rise to the occasion if they're passionate. And I love that you said loosen up and lighten up a little bit. That it's okay to have fun. That like not only have fun, but to do more things together. You talk about that as a team, that business and work can still be fun, even if you can't have water fights and bonfires. So loosen up and lighten up a bit. I thought that was really good. Leb, I have pages like both of you guys do. Anything you want to add that?
Yeah, I'll add 2 more. Because I think it's important to our listeners. You know, Karen, you said something about, picking leaders to surround yourself with. Number one, that's important, but people who show a desire to lead and are naturally curious and are willing to take risks. So you specified some things that you were looking for. I think that's important to be clear about. What am I looking for in leadership around me? And it can be very diverse, but I like those characteristics. And then the second one is, don't be afraid to fail. Failure is a part of the deal. It's not fatal. And learn from the mistakes that we make or the things that we fail at, because we'll only be better in the end.
Yeah, great. Well, this was a fun, very fun hour and a half spent. It was great to meet you, Patrick and Patsy.
Thank you.
Leb, I miss being at the farm. I just miss the people, but I also know that, I'm focusing on things for me, but I also know that I have to give it a little bit more time, just a little bit more time to have its own life and entity. It is a culture that I know will continue. It's been really rewarding, and I'm gonna go. I've been off traveling, and I just signed up for Vietnam, so
good for you.
I do a paddleboard kayaking and yoga retreat. So
awesome.
My kind of woman. Yep, that's great.
Now, Karen, if someone is listening in our area and is interested in going and potentially volunteering, or if someone is listening completely, the other side of the country, but they also either, whether it's running a business or they lead or have a similar, like run a garden, a similar kind of setup where they've got volunteers and they're just wanting to learn more, how do they find out? Is there a way to get in touch with you, or a way to get in touch with the garden itself, the program? Where would you point people?
That is a great follow-up question, because it's one that I didn't touch on and I was going to. We get tons of visitors to the farm. People hear about the elk, or they want to come and look at the conservation work we're doing, or come check out the garden because it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. Because of course we love pollinators, and pollination happens with flowers, and who doesn't like flowers, right? So we recently put in interpretive signs for self-guided tours, and that was one of the things that I wasn't going to retire until it was done. Well, we got funding, but then the pandemic hit, and that got delayed, and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, we just put the signs up 2 weeks ago. So there is a self-guided tour, and I'm going to give you the website. It has the location for our properties. The 54 acres is just the first property that the trust has. They also have purchased or been donated outright, I think 9 more properties. So we're over 300 acres now. So it's just going all around the Bay. It's really a very exciting conservation program. But the website is nehalemtrust.org. That's NEHALEMTRUST.org. And if you go on there, you'll get to see a couple of cameo videos about the food program, which are fun. And then also the various conservation. We've got other groups. We've got a teaching trail, so ethnobotany trail that has plants that the first people, Native Americans, had used for food and tools and baskets, clothing, that sort of thing, fibers. We've got conservation where we take out invasive species. That's every Friday morning. We've got a group of people that do that, and then plant native plants. Like I said, there's the elk herd, but people, come and visit all the time. And so I'm very stoked that we've got those signs up. And I learned how to do QR codes. So I put QR codes on the signs. So anybody that's tech savvy can just scan it and learn a whole lot more about it.
That's great.
Excellent. That's excellent.
Oh yeah. So that was a great question. Thank you.
Of course. Well, we want to make sure that we're highlighting the work that you've done and highlighting what you're passionate about. So it's the least we can do to thank you for coming on and gracing us with your time, with your insights, with gracing our listeners with how they can potentially view their employees slightly differently, maybe a little bit more as volunteers, recognizing that even with an organization of volunteers, you can still build a great place to work that people want to keep coming back to. So,
well, thanks. My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, listener, for sticking with us for another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. Make sure to download this episode's companion, Let's Get Practical, from our website, thefrustratedceo.com. Like and share this if you like what we're doing. And if you have any suggestions for new episodes, by all means, let us know. You can contact us directly through the website. Until then, or until next time, we'll say thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Frustrated CEO podcast.